My dad leaned closer and whispered, "Don't tell anyone you're mine." And we were standing in a hospital hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of disinfectant heavy in the air, and a nurse stopped walking, turned to look at us, and a doctor turned around and asked a question that changed everything. I'm 21 years old, and that morning I'd gotten a call from a number I didn't recognize, a woman's voice telling me my father had been in a car accident. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that he needed someone to come to the hospital, and I hadn't spoken to my dad in almost 3 years, not since he remarried and made it very clear that his new family didn't include me. But when you get a call like that, when someone says your parent is hurt, you go, even if they don't want you there, even if you know you're not really welcome. I drove to Northwestern Memorial Hospital in downtown Chicago, parked in the visitor lot, and walked through those automatic doors into the bright, sterile lobby, asked the woman at the front desk where I could find him, and she directed me to the third-floor orthopedic wing. And I took the elevator up, my heart pounding the entire time, not because I was scared he was hurt, but because I was scared of how he'd look at me, how he'd make me feel like I was an obligation, a burden, something he had to tolerate rather than someone he actually wanted to see. When I found his room, he was sitting up in bed, his left leg in a cast, his arm bandaged, looking tired but alert. And when he saw me walk in, his face didn't light up, didn't show relief or gratitude. It showed something closer to irritation. And he said flatly, "You didn't have to come." And I said, "They called me, said you needed someone here." And he shook his head, looked away, and said, "I told them not to call you." And those words hit me like a punch. But I swallowed the hurt and said, "Well, I'm here now. Is there anything you need?" He didn't answer, just stared at the TV mounted on the wall, some daytime talk show playing with the volume too low to hear, and we sat in silence for a few minutes until a nurse came in to check his vitals, a young woman with kind eyes who smiled at me and said, "Are you family?" And before I could answer, my dad said quickly, "He's just a friend, he was in the area." And I felt my chest tighten, felt that familiar shame creep up my neck. And the nurse nodded, didn't question it, and went about her work. And after she left, I looked at him and said quietly, "Why did you say that?" And he didn't look at me, just said, "Because it's easier." A few hours later, the doctor came in to discuss his discharge plan, a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and a calm, professional demeanor. And he started explaining the recovery process, physical therapy, follow-up appointments, and then he looked at me and said, "Are you the one who will be helping him at home?" And my dad said quickly, "No, my wife will handle it. He's not involved." And the doctor paused, looked between us, and said, "I see, so you're not related." And I opened my mouth to answer, but my dad cut me off, said firmly, "He's not my responsibility." And the room went silent. The doctor's expression shifted, something between confusion and disapproval, and he said carefully, "I'm sorry, I was told by the intake nurse that you're his son. Is that not correct?" And my dad's face went red, and he looked at me with this look that said, "Don't you dare." And I sat there frozen, torn between telling the truth and protecting him from his own embarrassment. And the doctor waited, and finally I said quietly, "I am his son." And my dad closed his eyes, let out a frustrated breath, and the doctor looked at him and said, "Then why would you say he's not your responsibility?" My dad didn't answer, just shook his head, and the doctor, instead of moving on, instead of letting it go like most people would, set down his clipboard and said, "Mr. Peterson, I need to be very clear with you about something. Your recovery is going to require help, someone to assist with mobility, medication management, daily tasks. And if you're refusing help from your son, I need to understand why, because from a medical standpoint, having family support significantly improves outcomes." And my dad finally looked at him and said, his voice tight, "It's complicated." The doctor nodded slowly, pulled up a chair, and sat down, which surprised both of us because doctors don't usually have time for this. They don't usually sit down and get involved in family drama, but he did, and he said, "I've been doing this job for 26 years, and I've seen a lot of complicated family situations, but what I've also seen is that pride and stubbornness kill more relationships than any actual conflict. So I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think before you answer. Do you want your son here or not?" My dad stared at him, and I could see something working behind his eyes, some internal battle, and he said finally, "It's not about what I want, it's about what's appropriate. I have a wife, I have a family, and he's not part of that anymore." And hearing him say it out loud, hearing him confirm what I'd always felt but never wanted to believe, made my throat close up, made tears sting my eyes, And I looked down at my hands, tried to keep my face neutral, and the doctor said, his voice sharper now, "He's not part of your family? He's sitting right here. He drove however far to be here. He's waiting to help you, and you're telling me he's not part of your family?" My dad didn't respond, and the doctor turned to me and said, "How old are you, son?" And I said, 21. And he asked, "How long has he been treating you like this?" And I hesitated, didn't want to air everything out, but something about the way he asked, the genuine concern in his voice, made me answer honestly. "Since he remarried, about 3 years ago." And the doctor nodded, turned back to my dad, and said, "So for 3 years, you've been pretending this young man doesn't exist, and now when you're vulnerable, when you need help, you're still trying to push him away? Do I have that right?" The room was completely silent, and my dad's face was red, his jaw clenched, and he said defensively, "You don't understand the situation." And the doctor said, "You're right, I don't, but here's what I do understand. In about 6 hours, you're going to be discharged from this hospital. You're going to need someone to drive you home, help you get settled, pick up your prescriptions, and based on what I'm seeing here, your son is the only person who showed up. So maybe instead of pushing him away, you should be thanking him." My dad looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time since I'd arrived, and I saw something flicker in his eyes, something that might have been guilt or regret or just exhaustion. And he said quietly, "I didn't ask you to come." And I said, my voice shaking slightly, "I know, but I came anyway because you're my dad and I thought that mattered." And he closed his eyes, let out a long breath, and the doctor stood up, picked up his clipboard, and said, "I'll leave you two to talk, but Mr. Peterson, I want you to think about what kind of man you want to be, because right now you're teaching your son that love is conditional, that family is disposable, and I promise you that's a lesson you'll regret." After the doctor left, my dad and I sat in silence for what felt like forever, and finally he said, without looking at me, "Your stepmother doesn't know you're here." And I said, "I know." And he said, "She won't like it." And I said, "That's not my problem." And he looked at me, surprised, and I continued, "I didn't come here for her. I came here for you, because despite everything, despite the fact that you won't even acknowledge me in public, you're still my dad, and I still care. But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep showing up just to be told I don't belong." He didn't say anything for a long time, and then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, he said, "I'm sorry." And it wasn't much. It wasn't the apology I'd been waiting for, the explanation I deserved, but it was something. And I nodded and said, "I'll drive you home. I'll make sure you're settled, and then I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back unless you actually want me to. Not because you need something, but because you want me in your life." And he looked at me, and I saw tears in his eyes, and he nodded. I drove him home that afternoon, helped him into his house, got him situated on the couch, picked up his medications from the pharmacy, made sure he had everything he needed. And his wife came home while I was there, looked shocked to see me. And my dad, for the first time in 3 years, said, "This is my son. He helped me today." And she didn't say anything, just nodded stiffly. And I left shortly after, walked out to my car feeling lighter somehow, like I'd finally set down a weight I'd been carrying for too long. I don't know if things will ever be normal between us. I don't know if he'll ever fully accept me as part of his life, but I learned something important that day. I learned that I can't control how he sees me. I can't force him to be the father I need him to be, but I can control how I see myself, and I am worth more than being someone's secret, someone's shame, someone who gets acknowledged only when it's convenient. And if he can't see that, that's his loss, not mine, and I'm finally okay with that.